fam, get ready for some sobering truth bombs, which for some of you will be like Christmas come early, but others it'll be hard to hear. But I respect you too much to do anything else. All right, so hello and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where the hits just keep on coming has taken on a very different meaning for Marvel these days. Disney too, but today we're talking about Marvel. Kevin Feige's like, how did this horribleness spread to me? I have some theories on that, which we're going to discuss. And we're going to do a whole deep dive into what went wrong in a moment. So much went wrong. But first, I want to acknowledge, as I said, that while some fans are rejoicing, some are devastated. And try to be mindful of that. You know, a lot of people, particularly those who are looking for better representation in the blockbuster space, this is a personal loss for them. So on that note, because I think this has been a lot of personal losses at this point, so I think maybe you're at a point where you're ready to hear, as I said, some truth bombs. So I want to say that no matter what a filmmaker's or fans' social priorities might be, don't forget to put on your business hat. You gotta wear it, because in order to get your social priorities to succeed, your movie or TV show has to succeed. In fact, you hurt your social priorities when these projects fail. It has become clear at this point that nobody, certainly not enough people, are going to go see a movie or watch a TV show because it's the right thing to do. They're just not going to do it, no matter how much you want them to, no matter how much you campaign for them to do it on social media. They're not going to do it. I mean, sure, that might be an angle that makes them take notice of a project and maybe even take a closer look. But audiences, again, clearly at this point, are not going to commit their money and time if they don't feel they're going to get enough bang for their buck. And by that, I think we clearly mean entertainment. That is what it is. That is the primary goal of movies and television, to entertain. And the other things are layered on top of that. And until the more socially conscious filmmakers in Hollywood realize this, and until their producers and studio executives have the guts to point it out to them, although I think part of the reason that producers and studio executives are not speaking up is because they are fearful that said filmmakers will call them out on social media if they give them more business-minded notes, instead of understanding that, you know, the producers in the studio. I mean, I'm not saying every note from the studio and producers is good, but I think that it's become a point where they're all vilified. And, you know, sometimes those people know what they're doing. So I think that's part of it too. I think it's part of the problem. Like people, to protect themselves, although they're getting fired too, but producers and studio executives are letting this talent in front of him behind the camera drive off the cliff. They're like, we see it, but we don't want to get pulled down off the edge of the cliff too. But once you let enough of your talent drive off the end of a cliff, you's gots to go too. So these projects are going to continue to falter. It's not going to change. You can keep releasing them. It's not going to get better. And this is ending up being really bad for representation. Thank goodness some projects are succeeding. And they're really, they're having to work in spite against these failures. Also, I think in an effort to root out trolls, which is totally understandable, but they have to keep working on how they're going to do that, because I think Rotten Tomatoes probably overcorrected their audience score, because the B cinema score for the Marvels was not only a horrible cinema score, but it was a surprise. Birds of Prey, Thor: Love and Thunder, and Dial of Destiny got B pluses. They got better scores. A B is in line with The Flash and Quantumania. I thought Quantumania was weak, particularly the second time that I watched it, and I thought that I enjoyed The Flash, but I'm in a rare group there. It's like the new Speed Racer. And the Marvels couldn't even match or beat almost all those films' opening weekends, with the exception of Birds of Prey, another female-centric comic book movie with no strong male lead. I mean, Birds of Prey did have Ewan McGregor as the villain, but don't forget, he's never been able to gross outside of Star Wars. He's not a box office draw at all. And his character, I think, was not particularly well realized. The Birds of Prey had other problems, like, wildly going off the source, not following the source material. But we're talking about the Marvels. And so I had said, is the Marvels Birds of Prey? But I think they have different issues. I think for the most part, Birds of Prey was hurt not only because they didn't do enough to appeal to the male audience, which we're going to talk about, but also, again, it was just so wildly off from the source material. I think that was the main problem with that film. Because I didn't like Birds of Prey, but I had a fun time with the Marvels. But The Marvels is the lowest opening ever for the MCU. Ever! Domestic and worldwide. Not even worldwide could save this movie. And Marvel has released 32 movies since 2008, and they're going down. Endgame, is there nowhere to go after that but down? Not this far down. The Marvel's audience actually still leaned male, because it's a superhero film. In fact, it leaned substantially male, and we're going to, again, discuss the male audience in a moment. But it did have broad appeal in terms of age and ethnicity. The audience just wasn't big enough. All right, so now I'm sure that someone at Disney Marvel said, hey, wouldn't it be great if more women were into superhero movies? And some of you have pointed out the irony of, there are definitely female fans. Hello! And I know there are a number of you who watch this channel. I love talking to you. I love hearing your thoughts on this stuff. But we have to acknowledge that we are, a smaller part of the group. And some of you have pointed out the irony of Disney trying to make Marvel and Star Wars more female-oriented when the whole reason that these brands were purchased by Bob Iger in the first place was Disney realizing that they didn't have enough male interest in their brand. They were skewing very female and very young, aka families. And so Iger noticed that Universal, who also has theme parks, they need these IP not only to get these audience groups into the multiplex to watch their streaming services, but also to go to the theme parks. So Universal was much more male-oriented, which is a very lucrative market. And so Iger was like, what can I do? I know, I'll buy Marvel and Star Wars. But then he handed it over to a group of people, the Disney people who worked for him, who only knew how to appeal to the female market. So they were like, we don't understand the male market. How can we shift these brands to what we would like them to be? And that's where the fear of being called out in social media comes back in, because you would think Bob Iger would say, what are you doing? That's not why I bought these. But I think he was afraid someone would tweet that and he might get canceled. So I guess he was like, have fun going off the edge of that cliff. The newest Disney ride, going over the edge of a cliff. So also, Kevin Feige, he has no problem appealing to young men. But perhaps he got a lot of internal pressure from the rest of Disney and the media and some fans, right? Who are like, why do you skew so male? Why don't you want to have other people in your group? Marvel, the MCU was very successful, but not at all diverse. So Kevin Feige kind of was going, in the opposite direction to a degree. And he's like, okay, now he has to appeal to women. And he clearly doesn't know how to do that. And so and he certainly doesn't know how to even hire the talent who can help him do it. It's just a mess. Now, I'm sure you've heard the term MCU. It's being used by some fan communities. And yes, the term is extremely offensive, but it's also becoming undeniably true. Does a female character need to be spotlighted in every single project? At first, it's like, whoa, calm down. So some female characters are, getting attention. Deal with it. But now I think all of us are like, it's getting to be a lot. What are you guys doing over there? And none of them are connecting. None of them are working. So wouldn't it be better, I think, to have a mix of leads, right? To cast a wider net of appeal and have a diversity of stories in every way possible. And ideally, everybody would show up for everybody's stories. But again, no one's going to do that. They have to look entertaining. They have to look like they're going to be a good time. And I think that, you have, as I said, some movies are connecting. So, Disney can't say it's an impossible task. It's simply a task they have not been able to master. I think because they're doing it just kind of like to do it. I think, they're wearing their social priorities on their sleeve rather, than just trying to be like, wouldn't it be, we should just tell a great story about this kind of a character. So that they want a pat on the head and, it's just too desperate. So this is a problem that Disney is having across the board, not just in Marvel. It's happening in every single one of their divisions. I think what it seems that they're trying to do is make every piece of content everything to everyone. But more often than not, they end up with something that actually appeals to absolutely no one. It's like, you did bring everyone together and not enjoying your project. And while some of you might counter that Barbie is the biggest movie of the year, well, hello, Ryan Gosling's Ken is a major part of that film's success. And The Marvels has no such equivalent character. Even WandaVision had Vision and Evan Peters and Randall Park. Wonder Woman, of course, had Chris Pine. And the first Captain Marvel movie had Samuel L. Jackson in a much bigger role, Jude Law, and Ben Mendelsohn. Although, it's a miracle that movie did as well as it did, because nobody there is a heavy hitter. Samuel L. Jackson, probably the best person there at that time. I think Secret Invasion has seriously undermined interest in him, at least as Nick Fury. But wow, I think it really was, the introduction of the Skrulls, the introduction of the first major female heavy hitter from Marvel, and then, of course, coming out between Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. But that couldn't have been just it, because Ant-Man and the Wasp also came out in that window and didn't do anywhere near $1 billion. All right, so also Barbie, thanks to Barbenheimer and the nostalgia trend, was a must-see theatrical event where, we've been talking about make your movie an event, make it a party. Whereas Disney has trained its audience to watch their content on Disney+. And Marvel isn't the only one having this problem. Disney Animation is suffering, and so is Pixar. We don't know what Star Wars is going to have happen because they can't get a new movie off the ground. But hopefully we'll find out at some point. And it could be a real issue for them as well, because they're pumping out Disney Plus series left and right. And they're also suffering, and they're also having a lot of these exact same problems. So I don't know why they would be immune. Also, the Marvels build significantly on Ms. Marvel, not only featuring Kamala Khan in the film, but her family as well. And that is the least watched Marvel Disney Plus show, which not only means that audiences aren't familiar with the character, but have no interest in being familiar with the character. Why would that suddenly change for the movie? And yes, it's not fair, because Iman Vellani is incredible as Ms. Marvel. But since when is Hollywood or life itself fair? Just add her to the list of fantastic actors that, unfortunately, just can't sell tickets. That's one of the reasons that actors who can sell tickets, even just sometimes under the right circumstances, get the big bucks. But it seems that Brie Larson is not one of those actors. The first Captain Marvel movie managed to succeed, but it also thrust her onto a much bigger stage. And the way she chose to conduct herself on that larger stage put her at odds with, not only some audiences, but a substantial chunk of the audience, particularly the one that she would need to go and see her in a comic book movie. Now, that's a perfectly valid choice for her to make, but all actors need to realize that if they're going to take such strong personal stands, it might mean that they can't star in a blockbuster movie that needs to have broad appeal. And I'm not just talking about women. Tom Hanks has become much more vocal over the past few years, and it has cost him. It has hurt his career, dramatically shrinking his appeal. Now back to Disney Plus. Whose dumb idea was it to have Loki Season 2's big finale, which was absolutely brilliant, debut basically the same weekend as The Marvels? It was a nightmare for us in the media to cover both of these effectively, and it certainly allowed Marvel fans to get their fix at home at no extra cost. In fact, some had waited to binge Loki Season 2, which means that Marvel had effectively released another movie the same weekend. But again, one at home at no extra cost. Who do you think people are going to choose? Because they know The Marvels is coming to Disney Plus probably pretty soon. And at least to digital, which is still cheaper. And then people will own it. And as I said, men are the primary audience for superhero fare, no matter the medium, comics, TV, or movies. And, I know that it might bother you, some of you, but it is just the way it is. And also they keep trying to change it, and they're not changing it. So I don't know if it can be changed. Sure, if a project can also appeal to a decent group of women, right, it will do even better. Like Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman got a big female audience. That was great. But you need the core male fandom to be the foundation of the project, its success. A problem that Star Wars is dealing with as well, by the way. So no matter what superhero story you tell, at these budgets, if someone wants to make a very inexpensive female-led superhero movie, maybe they can experiment a bit more. But if you're going to spend this much money to make the movie, you're going to live or die by the male audience, and that's just the cold, hard truth. Kapow! It's just, you're not doing yourself any favors by not accepting that. Because then you're just living a lie. And then you're going to be constantly frustrated and be like, but why did it happen again? And we're like, is that funny? All right, finally, bottom line, Marvel is having the same problem that Disney overall is having. A brand that was once dependable and almost always delivered now does the opposite. Audiences have gone from blindly trusting Disney, Marvel, etc. As I told you, it used to be before the pandemic that Disney released one movie a month. And for a large chunk of the movie-going audience, that was the movie they saw because they knew that it would always at least be decent. Now people don't feel that way anymore. So even if they still like the Disney brand, they're going to limit their risk by waiting for digital at a cheaper price point or for streaming, which is at no extra cost. And the price of that is going up. So people are even more motivated to wait for it to just go to streaming because they're already paying for that. It would take a string of top-notch quality projects to get audiences to blindly trust these brands again. And then also some of you might be saying, oh, well, it's the characters that they choose. And I can see that because, as I've said, Marvel Now did not work. Captain Marvel, never been popular as a character in the comics, so why would she suddenly become popular in the movies? But then, when Kevin Feige only had B or even C-level characters left, thanks to Stan Lee already licensing Spider-Man and X-Men and the Fantastic Four, etc., to Fox and Sony, right? He had to work with characters that nobody particularly liked. I mean, I don't know, I guess their comics sold okay, and people would say, oh, those are iconic characters, but they were not as good. The fact that Marvel still owned the rights to them, tells you a lot about the popularity of the characters at that time. And Kevin Feige and the people he was working with at that time were able to turn them into the most popular characters, even challenging Batman, Superman, well, particularly Batman and Superman. The fact that some people now think of Iron Man and Captain America instead is like mind-blowing because the Batman and Superman were for decades so much more successful in every medium, comics, movies, and TV. So Captain Marvel, they could have done the same thing. They could have made her just as popular. And I think that the problem was not only who they cast, but also who they had working on these projects. To bring the character to life. All right, so it's so bad. All right, so what's going on at the rest of the box office? Oh, are there other movies out? They're all just like, we don't know, or instead of, I guess their first response would be, we don't know her. But I think they'd also be like, do you want to come and see us, maybe? And I think everybody, post-pandemic, everybody's like, nah, we're good. We got other stuff to do, and we'll catch you down the line. All right, so Five Nights with a few exceptions. So Five Nights at Freddy's suffered another big drop in its third weekend, but again, with a $20 million budget and way over $200 million worldwide at this point, it's all been gravy for a while now. Taylor Swift suffered her first big drop, but she's close to $200 million domestic. Oh my gosh. And has almost broken into the top 10 grossing movies of the year so far. She'll pass the new Indiana Jones movie any day now. That's wow. Again, and it's Disney again. They're like, what the heck? Taylor Swift is like, what, on your right or on your left, right? Priscilla had an incredible hold, but that's because the movie almost doubled its theater count. So actually, the fact that it couldn't show an increase is pretty bad, like The Holdovers did with an addition of 714 theaters. But luckily for Sofia Coppola, a lot of awards movies are struggling, so it's still anybody's race. Like The Killers of the Flower Moon, which continues to drop, and the $200 million movie won't get anywhere near $100 million domestic. It has passed $100 million worldwide, but it's really struggling. Apple says, don't worry about it. This was an awards play for us. So Killers of the Flower Moon better get a lot of nominations. At least one win. At least one win, so it can say it's an Oscar-winning movie. But then what? So we'll see. Religious Fare continues to be a solid, dependable draw at the multiplex. Another way that theaters are continuing to think outside the box in these shifting times. Although this movie, instead of being from an outside source, outside the system, is from inside the system. The religious movie is coming from inside the house. It's a Sony release. And Eugenio Derbez's Spanish language Radical is still in the top 10 with a very small drop in its second weekend. Over on streaming, Mike Flanagan gets a bit of a reprieve as he knocks Suits down to number 2, only the second time that's happened in the past few months. The other time being also from Netflix with Virgin River's latest season. But Netflix is covered because they're co-streaming suits. They're like, we don't care. And we have 2 movies on the overall chart. Haunted Mansion fell significantly in its second week on Disney+, but it's still on the overall chart, which is great. And Jamie Foxx's The Burial on Prime Video managed to place as well with its debut on the overall chart. Now, Loki Season 2, with its second episode, still can't get on the overall chart, but at least on the originals chart, it's pretty high up there at number 4. And that's pretty good for Disney Plus these days. Disney Plus is like, we'll take it. Gen V is also holding on the bottom of the originals chart, but considering how rarely we see Prime Video on these charts at all, that's a win in a way as well. On the overall movies chart, Elemental continues to drop, but is still highly ranked here. And after our first Lin-Manuel Miranda-less week on Disney Plus last week, it seems it was not an anomaly, as none of his movies were able to place this week either. Truly, the end of an era. But Disney Plus, thankfully, continues to have evergreen holiday classics like The Nightmare Before Christmas. Over on Netflix, Famke Johnson is in the number 1 movie. That's less impressive for her, though, than it is embarrassing for Emily Blunt and Chris Evans. Why can't they get that up to number 1? I think it's too many movies about the opioid crisis at this point. Movies and series. And Across the Spider-Verse has finally hit Netflix. Remember, it was on Netflix that the first Spider-Verse movie truly found its audience, and why the sequel got such a glow-up. But now everybody saw Across the Spider-Verse in theaters, thankfully, and also, of course, when it was on digital for so long. So that's why it's not quite as strong on Netflix this time around. The first time it was on Netflix, everybody was like, what's this? Speaking of The Nightmare Before Christmas, what's this? What's this? Ooh, it's Miles Morales. As for Naiad, we'll see how awards voters feel, but Netflix viewers aren't too interested. I think Jodie Foster, well, let's just say I think she might be on the cusp of a huge comeback with True Detective. But this one just ain't cutting it. As for shows, while All the Light We Cannot See has horrible reviews, it still managed to debut at number 1, and True Crime continues to be a fan favorite. On iTunes, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, Part 1 with no Part 2, because they took that out of the title of the next movie. That's so weird. But anyway, that and Blue Beetle are now available to rent, putting them back on top. Blue Beetle is good, but Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning is so good. I hope people discover that. Dumb Money just hit digital and is doing pretty good. I mean, I watched it on Friday. I was very excited for it to hit digital. But let's just say it did not live up to at least my hype. It's no The Big Short or Moneyball. I don't think that's going to materialize for award season at all. And it's so obviously problematic in the way that it was made. I'm surprised they thought that it would do well. And wow, people sure love The Grinch. Right after Halloween, the live action and the animated versions are the 2 top Christmas movies on iTunes. I'm a little partial these days to the animated one, but they're both fantastic. Which one do you like better? And I think it's funny they've both managed to overtake Elf. But that is the third. So those are the tops. And we're just getting started in the holiday season. As for this coming weekend, a lot of movies are trying to get a jump start on Thanksgiving before Wish and Napoleon show up, the 2 juggernauts. So there's the Hunger Games prequel, which is taking all the premium screens from the Marvels. Trolls Band Together, aka Trolls 3. Saltburn and Next Goal Wins get limited releases. Did you hear what happened with Next Goal Wins? So their AMC had its first screen unseen screening, where it was a surprise movie which had not been released yet, and it was rated PG-13. So a lot of people guessed that it was the Marvels, and they would get to see it before anyone else. But of course, it wasn't the Marvels. It was instead another Disney-owned film, Next Goal Wins. And on the internet, a lot of people were upset, and they were talking about how disappointed they were and how they had walked out on the screening. And so I don't really think that went the way Disney Fox had hoped it would. I think that's the downside of surprising people with what it is. It could be a bad surprise. So we'll see. And Taika Waititi really needs for that to do okay. He can't, because then it would really, I think, cement the bad bad mojo that he has from Thor: Love and Thunder. And then, of course, Eli Roth's Thanksgiving-themed horror movie comes out. And I hope for his sake that's a huge hit, because Borderlands, his video game adaptation, I believe for Lionsgate, is such a mess that they're doing reshoots without him. So at least he better prove he can still do horror. Although, what's that, A Wonderful Knife? It's in under 1,000 theaters, but it couldn't make the top 10 this weekend. So I don't know if people like this holiday horror. What do you think? Will you take horror any way you can get it at any time of year? As for streaming, Christmas movies are starting. Christmas movies, new ones. Netflix has Best Christmas Ever on Thursday. And yes, that is Jason Biggs. While Disney Plus has Dashing Through the Snow on Friday. There's also some non-Christmas movies like Prime Video's documentary on Tyler Perry. SNL's Please Don't Destroy have their own movie on, of course, where else? Peacock, which is owned by NBC Universal Comcast. And Netflix has awards contender Rustin, all of those dropping on Friday. Finally, with series, big week. Again, all trying to get ready for Thanksgiving. Hulu has A Murder at the End of the World on Tuesday from Britt Marling. She certainly has a fandom at this point, so that could end up being something. While on Thursday, Max and Netflix go head-to-head with Julia Season 2 and The Crown Season 6 Part 1. Make no mistake, those are dropping against each other for a reason. I mean, they're the exact same audience. I think that's crazy to drop them at the same time. I actually kind of don't like Julia Season 2 as much as the first one, and I stopped watching it after an episode. I'm going to go back. But boy, The Crown Season 6 Part 1, it's 4 episodes, all about Diana. I mean, I just couldn't get enough of that. For some reason, the review embargo lifts when the show itself drops. It's like, why aren't you letting me scream from the rooftops how good this is? Maybe they're worried about, because they have some controversial takes, but it's very pro-Diana. I mean, It made me more in Diana's favor than I was before. I thought I'll talk to you about it when the embargo lifts, but I thought it was an incredible show and worthy of the legacy and celebrity that is Diana at this point. And Peacock has a tell-all documentary about the Kardashians. Then on Friday, Netflix drops their animated Scott Pilgrim series, where I'll be curious. I think they do a little bit of a Masters of the Universe situation there. I'm curious to see how people react to it when it happens yet again. And Apple TV debuts the first 2 episodes of their Godzilla series, Monarch. The first 2, which are, I think, movie level in many ways. That's going to be a good watch. And I'm going to review that this week as well. And that's this week's movie math. I was going to review Scott Pilgrim, but I got a lot of other stuff to cover, and I just don't want to deal with the potential toxicity that might erupt around that. All right, so anyway, and that's this week's movie. And also, if you just want to enjoy it, go ahead and enjoy it. I will say, I'm very curious to see what the reaction is to the Scott Pilgrim show. And I was surprised. And that's this week's movie math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And what are your thoughts on the MCU hitting a new box office low? Undeniably. I mean, you can argue creatively and all that stuff, but when it comes to the cold hard cash, this is the low with the Marvels. Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.